Think about the promises your worldview makes to you.
Hmm.
Like when you look at almost any grand narrative a culture builds to explain the universe, whether that's a major world religion or a political philosophy or even just the stories we tell our
Right.
kids.
There's always an underlying expectation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A contract, like a cosmic guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
It's this idea that if you follow the rules and, if you do the work and fight for the right side, the scales of the universe will eventually balance in your favor.
You're promised that the faithful will be rewarded.
Right, and the wicked get punished. And no matter how agonizing those middle chapters of the story become, you are ultimately guaranteed a victorious, happy ending.
Well, it's the ultimate psychological safety net, isn't it?
It really is.
We are entirely wired to crave that reassurance. I mean, if you are going to endure suffering, you need to believe that the suffering actually serves a purpose.
Right.
You need to know that order will permanently defeat chaos. That light at the end of the tunnel, that's what keeps human beings moving forward in the dark.
But today, we are taking you into a spiritual landscape where that contract is completely void. We are jumping into this deep dive on Norse mythology, and honestly, the worldview these people constructed is just terrifying.
It is intensely bleak.
Yeah, they built this massive, thriving civilization around a story where the good guys, the gods who protect humanity and maintain the order of the cosmos, are absolutely guaranteed to lose.
It is the literal definition of an unwinnable war. And that paradox is exactly why we are dedicating our time to this specific source material today.
Yeah, we're looking at a detailed script from the Nordic Saga, specifically their breakdown titled Episode 5, Ragnarök, the doom of the gods and the rebirth of the world.
Right, and our mission here is not just to recount an ancient story about, giants and monsters.
No, we want to go deeper than that.
Exactly. We want to understand how an entire culture, the people of the Viking Age, built their everyday lives around this, how they built their concept of courage and even their understanding of time itself around a final battle that they knew for an absolute fact would end in their own destruction.
Our source material actually refers to this as the hard, clean wisdom of facing the inevitable. And I want to linger on that contrast you brought up a second ago.
The contrast with standard Western traditions.
Yeah, because when you read through this script, you start to realize that Ragnarök is not just the final chapter of a mythology book, it's a lens.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the absolute key to understanding how the Norse viewed this illusion that, frankly, you and I hold on to so desperately today.
The illusion of control.
Yes, the illusion that we are in control of our own lives.
But it's deeply embedded in our linear traditions. I mean, in the monotheistic frameworks that eventually clashed with and overtook the Norse worldview, the end of the world is seen as a triumph.
Right. It's the Book of Revelation. The good guys win.
Exactly. The apocalypse is this necessary cleansing. It burns away the wicked and ushers in an eternal paradise for the righteous. It's basically a victory parade.
But for the Norse, Ragnarök is the ultimate, inescapable tragedy.
It's the death of everything sacred. The sun is devoured, the stars vanish, and the gods they pray to, Odin, Thor, Freyr, they all die these brutal, incredibly specific deaths.
And the most fascinating part to me, the gods know this, and they prepare for it anyway.
Right. They don't try to negotiate a peace treaty with the forces of chaos.
They don't look for an escape hatch.
No, they spend their entire immortal lives sharpening their weapons for a doom they cannot avoid.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to back up for a second. We are throwing around the word Ragnarök a lot, but to truly grasp the weight of this event, we really need to understand what that word actually meant to the people saying it.
The etymology is so important here.
Let's look at the Old Norse roots, because it reveals a ton about their mindset.
Well, the linguistic breakdown is essential. Ragnarök is a compound of two words. Ragna is the genitive plural of region,
Which means what exactly?
what translates to the ruling powers or the gods. It implies the divine entities that essentially hold the very fabric of the cosmos together.
Okay, and the second half?
The second half, Ruk, translates to the course of events, or fate, or destined end.
Wow.
So when you put them together, Ragnarök literally means the fate of the gods, or the destined doom of the powers.
That is just such an incredibly heavy phrase. I mean, it isn't called the final test or the great battle for Earth. The name itself contains the conclusion. It is their doom.
It leaves no room for ambiguity.
But the source material also points out this very persistent misconception about the translation. And I think a lot of our listeners might actually be carrying this one around.
Oh, the Twilight translation.
Yeah. When people hear this myth, they so often think of the phrase, Twilight of the Gods.
That is such a fascinating historical detour. We basically have the 19th century composer Richard Wagner to thank for that misconception.
Right, because of his opera.
Yes, Wagner popularized the German term Götterdämmerung in his massive operatic cycle. And that specific translation stems from early linguists making a mistake.
What kind of mistake?
They confused the Old Norse word rök with a short o, meaning doom or fate, with a very similar sounding word rökkr.
Which has the, look.
Exactly. And rök means twilight. So Doom of the Gods accidentally morphed into Twilight of the Gods.
But what the script notes here, and I find this really beautiful, is that even though Twilight is technically a mistranslation, both meanings capture the exact same atmospheric dread.
They really do?
Like, it is a destined doom, absolutely. But the visual of a twilight, a slow, inevitable darkening of the sky, the realization that the light of the gods is fading and this long night is coming, it just sets the mood perfectly.
Because it isn't a sudden explosion. It is a creeping shadow.
The creeping shadow is the perfect way to describe it, because this event does not sneak up on the gods at all. They have agonizingly detailed foreknowledge of what is coming.
The narrative of Ragnarök is handed to the gods as a prophecy. And the mechanism of how this prophecy is delivered is, without exaggeration, one of the most chilling sequences in all of human mythology.
It really is. It comes from an old Norse poem called the Völuspá, right?
Yes, which translates to the prophecy of the seeress.
This scene is just pure gothic horror. You have Odin, the All-Father, the chief of the Aesir gods, and he is so desperate for information about the future that he literally rides out to a grave.
He rides to a burial mound.
Yeah, and he uses his magic to drag a dead seeress, a vulva, back from the afterlife just to force her to speak to him.
You really have to consider the sensory details of that moment. He forces this ancient, rotting woman out of the cold earth.
It's so visceral.
And she doesn't just give him, a vague, cryptic riddle like an oracle usually would. She looks directly at him and recites the entire span of cosmic history. She starts at the very creation of the world from the body of a giant, moves all the way through the present day, and then seamlessly describes the future destruction.
Like she's watching it happen in real time right in front of her.
Exactly. But the most haunting element of the Völuspá isn't just the destruction she describes. It's how she interacts with Odin while she does it.
She keeps interrupting her own terrifying vision to ask him a question. Over and over, she pauses and asks, "Do you understand yet? Do you want to know more?"
It is so unsettling.
It really is. She is testing him. He demanded the absolute truth, and she is giving it to him, but the truth is so psychologically unbearable that she has to keep checking if his mind has broken yet.
It places this tremendous psychological burden on Odin. The text basically implies that he listens because he has an insatiable need to know, even though possessing that knowledge gives him absolutely no operational advantage.
Okay, wait. I am stuck on something here.
Sure.
If Odin is the supreme magic user of the universe, the chief of the gods, why does knowing the future give him no advantage?
That's the big question.
Like, why doesn't he just take this incredibly detailed blueprint of his own death and use it to cheat? If he knows a specific wolf is going to kill him on a specific day, why not just assassinate the wolf while it's a pup?
That question strikes at the absolute core of the Norse hierarchy, and it is very different from what we are used to in modern storytelling. Well, Odin is incredibly powerful, yes, but he is not omnipotent. Above the gods, above the universe itself, sits fate.
Fate with a capital F.
Exactly. And fate is controlled by the Norns. The Norns are these three ancient entities who sit at the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree. And they weave the threads of destiny for every single living being.
Including the gods.
Including the gods. They are older and deeper than the gods themselves. Odin cannot unweave what the Norns have already spun.
So he's trapped.
Completely. He can't travel back in time. He can't change the laws of physics. If the thread of his life intersects with the thread of the wolf at Ragnarök, that intersection is an immutable law of reality.
So it's like reading a psychological thriller where you flip to the last page first and discover that you are the victim who gets murdered.
That's a great analogy.
But you still have to go back to chapter 1 and live out the rest of the book. You have to turn every single page knowing exactly where the killer is waiting, and you can't put the book down.
You just have to march toward it.
Does that total lack of agency make the gods completely powerless then?
Well, it creates a fascinating paradox.
Yeah.
In the macro sense, yes, they are entirely powerless. They absolutely cannot alter the destination.
Right.
But in the micro sense, that absolute foreknowledge gives them a very specific fiercely guarded kind of power.
What kind of power?
Because the final outcome is fixed, they are completely liberated from the anxiety of trying to avoid it.
Oh, I see.
If you know you cannot survive the storm, you stop wasting energy trying to outrun it. Their only remaining choice, and therefore their ultimate power, is determining how they prepare.
How they face it.
Yes. With what level of dignity, defiance, and courage they meet that inescapable end.
So they surrender the what, which gives them total mastery over the how.
Precisely. And for the people who worship them, that distinction was the defining characteristic of a life well lived.
Okay, so we know the gods are sitting in Asgard, waiting. They've heard the dead woman's prophecy. They know the clock is ticking. But how does it actually begin?
The unraveling.
Yeah, because when you and I think of an apocalypse today, we are so heavily conditioned by Hollywood disaster movies. We expect sudden, violent spectacle.
Meteor strikes, massive earthquakes.
Alien invasions right out of the gate. But the unraveling of the Norse universe doesn't start with an explosion. It starts with something much quieter, colder, and honestly, deeply human.
The end of the world does not begin with fire. It begins with the fading of light.
Right.
The very first domino to fall in the sequence of Ragnarök is the death of the god Balder. Now, within the pantheon, Balder is described as the absolute best of them.
He's universally loved, right?
He is. He's the god of light, of purity, of joy. He is so beloved that every single object in the universe, every rock, tree, disease, and animal, they all swore an oath never to harm him.
Except for one tiny sprig of mistletoe, which was deemed too young to swear the oath.
Yes, the one loophole.
And Loki, the trickster, discovers this loophole. He literally fashions a dart out of the mistletoe, hands it to Balder's blind brother Hoder, and guides Hoder's hand to shoot it at Balder as a deadly prank.
And when that mistletoe pierces Balder and he dies, the fundamental nature of the cosmos shifts.
It's the point of no return.
It is. The gods attempt to negotiate with the ruler of the underworld to get him back, and they fail. That failure is the true beginning of the end.
Because Loki's malice won.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When the gods realize that Balder cannot be resurrected, that Loki's malice was ultimately stronger than the combined love of the entire universe, the countdown officially starts.
Wow.
The world is effectively already dead. It is just going to take a while for the physical destruction to catch up to the spiritual death.
Which leads directly into the second warning sign. And again, I keep expecting monsters to show up here, but the seeress tells us that the next phase is a total moral collapse.
The Wolf Age.
Yeah, she calls it an axe age, a wind age, a wolf age. Human society just rots from the inside out.
The Voluspa details a terrifying, methodical disintegration of the human social fabric. It says that brothers will fight and kill each other. Sisters' children will defile kinship.
Basically, nobody is safe.
No one. The sacred oaths that bind society together are just casually broken. There is rampant greed, sexual violence, and betrayal. The seeress states plainly that no man will spare another. It is a period of utter nihilism.
I find this so striking. We assume ancient people were most afraid of, like dragons or frost giants. But the real visceral horror for the Norse was just people being completely awful to each other. Why was this specific kind of moral decay, this dissolution of family bonds, so uniquely terrifying to them?
Well, to understand the terror of the Wolf Age, you really have to understand the mechanics of survival in ancient Scandinavia.
Yeah, 'cause I set the scene for us.
In that harsh, unforgiving environment, you simply could not survive as an isolated individual. There was no overarching state police force. There was no central government to protect your farm from raiders or the winter.
You were entirely on your own.
Well, you were reliant on your kin. Your physical safety, your property rights, and your life depended entirely on your kinship bonds and the strict oaths you swore to your local chieftain and your neighbors.
Right.
The law was maintained by local assemblies, and justice was often enforced by blood feuds. If your family was not unified, you were incredibly vulnerable.
So if you can't trust your own brother to watch your back at the assembly, or if your neighbor breaks his oath to share winter resources, you are a dead man.
Exactly. That invisible web of trust, loyalty, and honor was the literal foundation of their reality.
The glue holding it all together.
Yes. So when the prophecy describes a time when those bonds completely dissolve, it is describing a terror far worse than a monster.
Because you can fight a monster.
You can hit a monster with an axe. But the sudden creeping realization that the very concept of loyalty no longer exists, that your own son might slit your throat for your silver while you sleep.
God, that's dark.
It's a highly sophisticated, deeply psychological vision of an apocalypse. Society dies from within. The humans destroy themselves before the cosmic forces even need to lift a single finger.
And once society is broken, the physical world begins to shut down. The third warning sign is the Fimbulwinter, the mighty winter.
The Great Winter.
And this isn't just a heavy snowfall. The prophecy says it is 3 brutal, devastating winters back to back with absolutely no summer in between.
3 solid years of unbroken snow, freezing temperatures and biting winds from all directions. The sun provides no warmth whatsoever. The ice simply never thaws.
Think about the existential dread of living through that. You survive the first winter, which is already a massive physical toll for a pre-industrial agrarian society.
You're burning through all your supplies.
Right. You eat the last of your stored grain and your salted meat. You are waiting desperately for spring. The calendar tells you it is April, then May, but the snow just keeps falling.
The lakes stay completely frozen solid.
You try to plant seeds, but the ground is permafrost and the seeds just rot in the dirt. At what point during that second year do you realize that the seasons themselves are permanently broken?
For a people whose entire existence revolved around that brief, intense window of the summer harvest, just to store enough calories to survive the darkness, the Fimbulwinter was a vision of slow, agonizing starvation.
Yeah.
The world isn't violently ripped apart. It just gives up. It starves and freezes to death in the dark.
And our source material highlights this absolutely incredible historical theory about where this idea of the Fimbulwinter actually came from. Because it doesn't seem like just a scary campfire story.
No, it doesn't.
It points heavily to actual lived cultural memory.
This is where mythology and climatology intersect beautifully. Historians and scientists have found concrete evidence of a massive global climate catastrophe that occurred around the year 536 CE.
536 CE, what happened?
There were enormous volcanic eruptions, likely in the northern hemisphere, possibly Iceland or North America, followed by another in the tropics a few years later.
Okay.
These eruptions pumped incomprehensible amounts of ash, sulfur, and aerosols into the stratosphere, creating a dense veil over much of the globe.
They literally blotted out the sun.
They did. We actually have historical records from the Byzantine Empire, from China, from Ireland, all describing the exact same terrifying phenomena.
What do the records say?
They describe the sun appearing dim and bluish, casting no shadow even at noon. They say it looked like the moon for over a year.
Wow.
The climate impact was immediate and devastating. Average temperatures plummeted. We can see it in tree rings from that era. There was essentially a decade of failed summers.
And in Scandinavia, the archaeological record is grim, isn't it?
It is horrific. Entire farming settlements were abandoned. Burial sites show clear signs of mass starvation. The population crashed violently. It was a genuine historical experience of the world seeming to end in endless cold.
And this is how trauma encodes itself into culture.
Exactly.
The human beings who barely survived that 536 CE bottleneck, they didn't have the scientific vocabulary to describe stratospheric aerosol injection.
Right, they couldn't say volcanic winter.
So they passed down the story the only way they could, through oral tradition. They told their children about the time the sun went away, the summer never came, and half the world died.
And over centuries of storytelling, that historical trauma morphed and elevated into mythological dread.
So the Fimbulwinter of Ragnarök isn't just a fantasy. It is very likely the half-remembered ghost of a real apocalypse that their ancestors actually lived through.
That is precisely what scholars believe. It's cultural PTSD translated into myth.
That just reframes the entire myth for me. It is history wrapped in prophecy. Okay, so human society has rotted from the inside, the climate has completely collapsed into endless winter, and that is the exact moment the physical bindings of the universe finally snap.
The cosmic prison break.
Yes, we move from the quiet, starving unraveling into what the source calls the cosmic prison break.
The forces of chaos, which the gods have spent all of history trying to bind and hold back, are finally let off the leash.
And it starts in the sky.
It does. The physical breakdown begins in the heavens. In Norse cosmology, the sun and the moon are personified entities, and they are constantly driving their chariots across the sky.
Running for their lives.
Yes, because they are constantly being hunted by 2 massive cosmic wolves, Skull and Hati. At Ragnarök, the hunt finally ends. The wolves catch their prey.
One wolf swallows the sun, plunging the dying earth into absolute darkness. The other swallows the moon.
And the seeress says the stars themselves are ripped from the sky and fall into the void.
And without the gravitational anchor of the sun, the earth begins to violently shudder. The prophecy describes earthquakes so severe that mountains just crumble into the valleys. Ancient trees are violently ripped up by their deep roots.
And because of those earthquakes, every single chain, every shackle, every magical binding in the cosmos simultaneously shatters.
Which means the real monsters are loose. I want to look closely at the forces of chaos being unleashed because the descriptions are so visceral. Let's start with the wolf, Fenrir.
Fenrir is the monstrous offspring of Loki. Centuries earlier, the gods saw how fast he was growing and realized he was a massive threat to the cosmos.
They knew he was going to be a problem.
They did. They tried to bind him several times and failed, eventually tricking him into being tied with a magical ribbon called Gleipnir, which was crafted by the dwarves.
And that binding actually cost the god Tyr his right hand? Right.
Yes, Fenrir bit it off when he realized he was trapped. But now, at Ragnarök, that magical dwarf-forged ribbon snaps like dry grass.
And the scale of Fenrir is just mind-bending. The source describes him growing to a size that the human brain can barely process.
He is unfathomably huge.
When he breaks free and opens his mouth to consume the world, his lower jaw scrapes the bedrock of the earth and his upper jaw touches the top of the sky.
He is essentially a walking, breathing black hole. He is the physical embodiment of unstoppable, all-consuming destruction. Fire blazes from his eyes and his nostrils as he runs, burning whatever the winter hasn't killed.
And while Fenrir is tearing up the land, the oceans are basically boiling over.
Yes, because of his brother, Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent.
Another of Loki's lovely children.
Exactly. Odin threw this serpent into the ocean when it was young, and it grew so massively that it encircles the entire earth, biting its own tail at the bottom of the sea just to hold the oceans in place.
But when the bindings break,
The serpent lets go of its tail. It rises from the crushing depths in an absolute fury. Its movements cause cataclysmic tsunamis that flood the continents, washing away human settlements.
the waters just rise up and swallow everything.
And as it breaks the surface of the boiling water, it spews massive clouds of its venom, permanently poisoning the air and the sea.
So the land is being eaten by a world-sized wolf, the continents are drowning, the atmosphere is totally toxic. And then we get to the mastermind. The orchestrator of all this chaos finally breaks his own chains. Loki.
We really have to understand the state Loki is in when he gets free.
Right, because he's been locked away for a while.
His punishment for orchestrating the death of Baldur was unimaginably cruel. The gods dragged him into a dark cave. They took his two sons, turned one into a wolf, who immediately ripped the other son to pieces.
Oh my god.
Then the gods took the entrails of Loki's murdered son, turned them to iron, and used them to bind Loki to 3 massive stone slabs.
It is horrific.
And it gets worse. Above his head, they fastened a venomous snake, which dripped burning acid onto his face second by second for centuries.
It's constant torture.
His wife, Sigyn, stayed by his side, holding a bowl to catch the venom. But every time she had to turn away to empty the bowl, the acid hit his face, and his writhing caused the earthquakes of the human realm.
I have to interject here. I mean, the gods did this to protect themselves, obviously. But by subjecting Loki to centuries of such sadistic, unfathomable torture involving his own children, didn't they essentially guarantee that when he finally got out, he would want to burn the universe down?
It really feels like it.
It feels like the gods manufactured their own worst enemy.
It is the ultimate self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? In their desperate, cruel attempt to stave off fate, they ensure that the agent of their destruction has absolutely no mercy left in his heart.
None at all.
When those iron entrails finally snap, Loki is not just a trickster anymore. He has been marinating in agony and absolute localized rage for an eternity. He shakes the venom from his face, leaves the cave, and takes his place as the commanding general of the enemy army.
And he has vast legions flocking to his banner. The sky splits open, and from the realm of fire, Muspelheim rides Surt.
The fire giant.
He is this devastating fire giant wielding a flaming sword that shines brighter than the sun that was just eaten. He leads an army of fire demons riding over the Rainbow Bridge, Bifrost, causing it to shatter under their weight.
And then sailing out of the flooded, poisoned ocean comes the detail that I think is the most brilliant, bizarre, and terrifying invention in this entire mythos. The ship Naglfar.
I could not stop thinking about this ship. I really couldn't. Naglfar sails from the realm of the dead, bringing Loki and the legions of hell to the battlefield. But the horror isn't just who is on the ship. It is what the ship is made of.
Naglfar is constructed entirely from the untrimmed fingernails and toenails of dead human beings.
Just you as a listener, just pause and visualize that. An entire warship, massive enough to carry an army of the dead, built plank by plank from human keratin.
It's a grotesque image.
It's so gross. But it isn't just a gross aesthetic choice. The source explains why this matters, and it is a staggering insight into how Norse mythology dictated daily human behavior.
Because the belief was that every time a human died with their nails untrimmed, those nails were harvested by the forces of chaos and added to the construction of Naglfar.
Which means that personal hygiene and burial rituals were literally a matter of cosmic security.
Yes,
How did a Norse family actually handle this?
it was a solemn duty. When a family member died, before the body was burned or buried, the relatives would carefully and meticulously trim the deceased's fingernails and toenails.
And then what? Throw them away.
They would often burn the clippings or dispose of them in a way that rendered them completely unusable. Because if you buried your grandfather with long nails, you were quite literally supplying building materials to the enemy shipyard.
It connects the grand, sweeping doom of the gods right down to the dirt under a peasant's fingernails. You are sitting in your freezing house in the middle of winter, trimming a corpse's nails, thinking, I am doing my part to delay the apocalypse.
Exactly. It brings the myth into your living room. It makes it tangible. But despite all those thousands of years of trimming nails, the ship is finally finished. It sets sail.
The sky is dark, the earth is flooding, the wolf is running loose, the fire giants are marching. And up in the realm of the gods, standing at the edge of Asgard, the watchman sees it all.
Heimdall.
The god whose senses are so acute he can see for hundreds of miles in the dark and hear the wool growing on the back of the sheep. He sees the cosmic prison break. He knows the hour has come.
And he acts.
He reaches for the Jallarhorn, the great horn, and he blows it with a force that shatters the silence of the 9 worlds.
That horn blast is the pivot point of the myth. It is the alarm that cannot be unrung. When the Jallarhorn sounds, the period of waiting and preparing is officially over. The gods put on their armor, they ride out to meet their doom.
You know, the source makes an incredibly poignant connection right here to the television series Vikings of Valhalla.
Yes.
That show is set at the tail end of the Viking Age, a time when Christianity was rapidly sweeping through Scandinavia, totally displacing the old pagan ways. And understanding Ragnarök completely changes how you view the desperation of those historical figures.
It provides a vital historical lens.
Yeah.
If you were a true pagan believer living in the 11th century, witnessing the unstoppable political and cultural rise of Christianity didn't just feel like you were losing a theological debate.
Yeah.
It felt like Ragnarok was unfolding in real time.
Because your cosmology explicitly promised you that one day the forces of order would fall. So when you watch the sacred groves being chopped down, when the old temples are burned, when the kings are baptized, and the ancient blood rituals are outlawed, you aren't just culturally offended.
You're watching the end of the world.
You are watching the twilight of the powers. The apocalypse is happening all around you, not with the giant wolf eating the sun, but with the quiet, relentless, systemic spread of a wooden cross.
It grants immense empathy to those historical actors, doesn't it? They fought so fiercely because they genuinely believed they were defending the last remnants of a dying universe against the forces that were destined to end it.
And that leads us to the ultimate clash. Heimdall's horn is ringing in their ears. The forces of Asgard ride down to the great plain of Vigrid. This is the arena, the battlefield where order meets chaos.
Vigrid is described as a vast, desolate plain stretching 100 leagues in every direction. It is the designated site for the final reckoning.
We have already mapped out the enemy: Loki, Fenrir, the serpent, Surt, and the legions of the dead. Now, Asgard empties out to meet them. Odin leads the Aesir gods, but he does not ride alone.
Not at all.
This is the moment we see the ultimate payoff for the single most obsessive project Odin has been working on since the beginning of time: the Einherjar.
The Einherjar are the great spectral army of the dead. If you read any Norse mythology, you constantly see Odin and his supernatural handmaidens, the Valkyries, scouring human battlefields.
Right, they're always watching humans fight.
They are always plucking the most courageous, violent, skilled warriors who die in combat and ferrying their souls up to Valhalla.
And what do they do in Valhalla? They don't sit on clouds playing harps.
Hardly.
They wake up, put on their armor, and fight each other to the death in the courtyard. Then they resurrect, feast on magical boar, drink mead, and go to sleep. Every single day, for thousands of years, it is a grueling, endless military boot camp.
And all of it was explicitly to prepare them for this one morning at Vigrid.
The logistics the myth provides are just staggering. The poem states that the Hall of Valhalla has 540 immense doors, and when the Jallarhorn sounds, 800 warriors march out of each door, shoulder to shoulder
It's
simultaneously.
a massive
I
force.
did the math on that. That is 432,000 of the greatest, most blood-soaked human warriors who ever lived across all of history, marching in perfect unison behind the Allfather. It is an awe-inspiring image of military might.
It is. But that magnificent image is instantly undercut by the brutal, tragic truth hanging over the entire procession. Odin already knows that this 400,000-man army of elite, immortal soldiers will not be enough.
See, this is where I have to push back on the logic of the gods. Why?
Why fight?
Yeah, Odin sacrificed his own eye for wisdom. He hung himself by the neck from the branches of the World Tree, bleeding for 9 days, just to learn the magic of the runes. He betrayed kings, he incited human wars, just to harvest the casualties for his army. He did all of this horrible, excruciating work to build this force. Why put in all that effort if the seers already told him with absolute certainty that he is going to lose?
Because you are applying a modern, results-oriented framework to an ancient, honor-based mindset.
Okay, correct me then.
For the Norse, the value of the effort wasn't about whether or not it changed the outcome. The outcome belongs to the Norns. It is out of your hands. The value of the effort is about facing the inevitable with absolute, unbroken defiance.
So the alternative is what? Just sitting in Asgard waiting to die.
Exactly. To surrender to chaos before the appointed hour, to lay down your weapons just because you know you will lose, is the ultimate cosmic cowardice.
I see.
Odin builds the massive army, he puts on his shining golden helmet, he takes up his great spear Gungnir, and he charges the wolf, because that is what a king does. You do everything in your immense power to fight the dark, precisely because the dark is coming. The effort is the point.
The effort is the point. Wow. And the dark meets him head on. The Battle of Vigrid isn't a chaotic, disorganized melee. The prophecy details how the major players die, and they are incredibly specific, deeply poetic, and often ironic matchups. Let's look at the climax of Odin's story.
Odin rides straight at Fenrir. It is the Allfather against the world devourer, the god of magic and intellect against pure, mindless, consuming hunger.
And he knows he's going to die.
Odin knows this is his doom. He charges anyway. And exactly as the Voluspa foretold, the wolf's massive jaws snap shut. Odin is swallowed whole.
Just like that. The chief of the gods, dead in an instant. But the narrative doesn't let Fenrir wipe his mouth and walk away. Odin is immediately avenged by his son, Vidar.
Vidar is a fascinating figure. He is known as the silent god. He barely speaks in the other myths, but he has one extremely specific, prophesied task at Ragnarok.
And Vidar's revenge involves another one of those incredible micro-macro details that ties human labor to cosmic events, doesn't it?
Yes, Vidar attacks the wolf wearing a very specific magical shoe. According to the lore, this shoe has been constructed over centuries from all the tiny discarded leather scraps that human cobblers trim off the toes and heels while making shoes.
So just like the fingernails building the enemy ship, every time a Norse shoemaker tossed a useless scrap of leather onto the floor, they were unknowingly contributing to the armor of the god who would avenge Odin.
The collective labor of humanity fortifies the divine. Vidar steps down on Fenrir's lower jaw with his magically dense, historically thick shoe. He grabs the wolf's upper jaw with his bare hands, and with strength surpassing even Thor's, he physically tears the monster's mouth apart, ripping the beast in two.
Just rips him in half.
The wolf dies, but the Allfather is not coming back.
And while that is happening, the earth is shaking from the clash everyone has been waiting for since the beginning of the myths. Thor, the defender of Asgard, the ultimate protector of humanity, finally locks eyes with his great nemesis, Jomungandr, the Midgard serpent.
They have a bitter history. Thor nearly killed the serpent on a fishing trip in an earlier myth, but the giant he was with panicked and cut the line.
Right, I remember that story.
Now, there is no one to interrupt them. The battle is cataclysmic. It is the god of storms, wielding thunder and lightning against a serpent massive enough to crush the earth, spewing lakes of venom.
And remarkably, defying the gloomy tone of the battle, Thor actually wins. He swings his legendary hammer, Mjolnir, and crushes the serpent's skull. The beast collapses, dead. Thor has protected the world one last time.
But the victory is immediately snatched away from him. As the enormous serpent thrashes in its death throes, it exhales a final, massive cloud of toxic venom directly onto Thor.
The source describes what happens next, and it is arguably the most cinematic, tragic moment in the entire saga. Thor, having just slain the greatest monster in existence, staggers backward out of the poison cloud.
He takes 9 steps.
Just 9 heavy, exhausted footfalls.
And on the 9th step, the poison stops his heart. He falls to the earth, dead.
It's like a slow-motion sequence. You can feel the sheer tragedy of knowing you won the absolute fight of your life, but you lost your life in the process. He dies right next to the monster he defeated, and the worst part is his sacrifice doesn't save anyone because the rest of the world is still burning down around him.
The destined pairings continue across the battlefield, and they are all tragic in their own way. Consider Freyr, the god of fertility, peace, and agriculture.
Okay, who does he fight?
He is forced to face Surt, the apocalyptic fire giant. But Freyr enters the most important battle in the history of the universe severely handicapped.
Right, because of a choice he made in his youth. In an earlier myth, Freyr fell so madly in love with a giantess that he gave away his magical, self-fighting sword to his servant as payment to go woo her. He traded his ultimate weapon for love.
And at Ragnarök, that bill comes due. Without his magical sword, he is forced to fight Surt with the antler of a stag.
An antler against a flaming sword.
It is a valiant effort, but flesh and bone cannot withstand the cosmic fire. Freyr is cut down by Surt's flaming blade. It is a sacrifice for love that ultimately costs him his life at the end of the world.
And then we have the final duel, Heimdall and Loki.
The Watchman and the Traitor. This is a deeply philosophical matchup. They are ancient, bitter enemies, diametrically opposed in everything they represent.
Total opposites.
Heimdall is absolute loyalty, vigilance, and duty. Loki is pure self-interest, deception, and chaos.
They lock into a brutal final combat, and the result is the ultimate stalemate. They strike each other mortal blows. Neither survives. They bleed out next to each other, perfectly canceling each other's ideologies out.
And with Heimdall dead, with Thor dead, with Odin devoured, the defensive line collapses. Surt stands amidst the carnage of Vigrid. He raises his flaming sword and he unleashes the fire.
The whole world burns.
The flames sweep across the 9 worlds. The great world tree, Yggdrasil, shudders and burns. The earth is scorched to ash. The sky turns black, and slowly, the ruined, smoking landmass sinks beneath the boiling waves.
The fire burns itself out. The water claims whatever is left. There are no gods. There are no humans. There is no light. Just dark, empty water and absolute silence.
That's the end.
In our Western linear mindset, this is where you close the book. The ink runs out. Evil won. The universe is dead. Period. But here is where the Norse worldview executes this incredible, shocking pivot. We have arrived at the rebirth.
The silence of the drowned world is not permanent. The Völuspá, the prophecy of the Seeress, does not end with the fire.
She keeps talking.
She looks past the destruction. And what she describes next is a slow, breathtaking resurrection. Out of that dark, quiet water, a new earth begins to breach the surface.
And it isn't a charred, radioactive wasteland. The poem describes it as unspeakably beautiful. It is green, fertile, and clean. The waters have washed away all the old corruption, the broken oaths, the blood of Vigrid, the poison of the serpent. It's a blank slate.
And crucially, we learn that the fire did not consume everyone. A new, much smaller pantheon emerges, consisting almost entirely of the younger generation. Vidar and Vali, the sons who avenged Odin, survived.
And Thor's kids, right?
Yes, Thor's sons, Modi and Magni, whose names literally translate to brave and strong. They walk out of the ashes.
And they are carrying something incredible. Magni and Modi retrieve their father's hammer. Mjolnir survived the fire. The ultimate symbol of protection and order endures the apocalypse.
It is a transfer of legacy. But perhaps the most emotionally resonant moment of the rebirth is who returns from the underworld. Baldur comes back.
The god of light, whose tragic death started the entire horrific countdown in the first place. He finally walks out of the realm of the dead. But he doesn't come back alone, does he?
No. He walks into the new world side by side with Hodur, his blind brother. The very brother whom Loki tricked into throwing the fatal dart.
I am amazed by that. The murdered brother and the unwitting murderer returning together, completely reconciled. There is no vengeance. The original sin that broke the universe is forgiven and healed in the new world.
And the divine realm isn't the only thing that gets a second chance. Humanity survives as well, by the slimmest of margins. 2 human beings, a man and a woman named Lif and Lifthrazir.
Their names translate roughly to life and stubborn will to live. How did they survive the fire of Surt in the boiling oceans?
During the absolute height of the cataclysm, they found the deepest sanctuary possible. They hid within the wood of Hodmimir's Holt, which is often interpreted as the world tree itself.
So they hid inside the tree.
The massive trunk of Yggdrasil shielded them, Well, the branch is burned.
The tree of life, physically protecting the actual seeds of human life. And they survive by eating nothing but the morning dew. Once the fires are gone and the earth cools, they climb out of the wood. And from Lif and Lifthrasir, the entire human race will be repopulated.
The cycle of humanity restarts. And the source script ends this section with a quiet, beautiful scene that perfectly encapsulates the mood of the survivors.
Paint the picture for us.
The remaining gods, Vidar, Modi, Magni, Baldur, they gather in the fresh, uncut grass of this brand new world. And as they sit together, looking at the empty sky, they find something glittering in the dirt.
They find the golden game pieces, the exact same golden game pieces that their fathers and mothers, the old gods who died at Vigrid, used to play with on the lawn of Asgard before the world began to rot.
They sit in the grass, holding these small golden tokens, and they begin to talk. They remember Odin's wisdom. They recount the tale of Thor smashing the serpent. They remember the terror of the wolf. It is a moment of profound, heavy grief, but also undeniable continuity.
It makes me think of returning to your childhood home after a devastating fire. You're sifting through the wet ashes of everything you ever knew, and you find a family heirloom completely intact. You find your grandfather's pocket watch. Holding those golden game pieces represents unimaginable loss, but it also proves that the past was real. It proves that you survived to carry the memory forward.
It perfectly synthesizes the psychological core of this mythology. The Norse apocalypse is not nihilistic. It does not argue that because everything ends, everything is pointless.
Right.
It argues that time is cyclical. Endings are violently real. The pain of loss is absolute. The things you build will fall down. But destruction is not the final state of the universe.
If we contrast this again with the linear frameworks we are so used to, it's a completely different paradigm. In a linear tradition, history is an arrow flying toward a final target. Good defeats evil, and then time essentially stops in a state of static, eternal perfection.
The Norse viewed time as a great wheel. Creation, flourishing, corruption, destruction, and then creation again. The ashes of the old world are literally the fertilizer for the new green grass.
Like farming.
It is an organic agricultural understanding of time. Winter always comes, and winter kills everything, but spring always, inevitably, follows the ice. Ragnarök is simply the ultimate cosmic winter.
So we have explored this sweeping, magnificent epic of doom, courage, and cyclical rebirth. But we have to ask, how did this cosmic architecture translate into the mud, blood, and daily lives of the people who actually believed it?
How did it shape them?
Exactly. How did this myth become human action? This brings us to the hard, clean wisdom of the Norse worldview.
We cannot treat Ragnarök as just a cool fantasy novel. For the historical Norse people, this was their absolute reality, and believing this cosmology produced a very specific, historically formidable type of human being.
They were terrified.
It produced a culture that completely terrified Christian Europe, largely because they genuinely did not seem to fear death.
Let's follow their logic. If your foundational belief is that the exact date and manner of your death were fixed by the Norns the moment you took your first breath, then worrying about dying is literally a waste of calories.
Right.
You cannot avoid your fate by hiding under the bed. The roof will just collapse on you.
Exactly. Add to that fatalism their spiritual incentive structure. The highest possible honor, and the only way to reach the halls of Valhalla, is to die bravely in the chaos of battle.
And then the third piece.
Yes, finally, cap it off with the theological knowledge that even your gods, the supreme creators of your universe, will one day march out to certain brutal deaths and meet their fate without flinching.
When you combine those three beliefs, cowardice isn't just a personal failing or a social embarrassment. It is cosmically inappropriate.
Unthinkable.
If Odin, the Allfather, can look a world-eating wolf in the eye and charge with his spear, knowing he will be eaten, how dare you drop your shield and run away from a human with an axe?
The Norse warrior ideal was, quite literally, an attempt to imitate the gods at Ragnarök. You were supposed to meet your personal doom exactly the way Thor met the serpent. Swinging your weapon, unbroken, magnificent in your defiance, even if you know in your bones that you are taking your last 9 steps.
I want to bring this directly to you, the listener. Think about how we live today. We spend our time, our money and our emotional energy trying to aggressively control our fate.
Mm-hmm.
We buy premium life insurance, we obsess over longevity diets, we track our sleep data, we plan our 401ks down to the decimal point. We operate under this pervasive, exhausting illusion that if we are just smart enough or careful enough, we can outsmart loss, we can outsmart death.
Yeah.
But the Norse rejected that
They
entirely.
completely rejected it.
I have to ask, isn't there something incredibly liberating about just looking at the universe and admitting, I cannot control the end of my story. I can only control the posture with which I face it.
It is a massive psychological unburdening. Releasing the illusion of control frees you from the paralyzing anxiety of trying to manage the unmanageable. The only question worth asking in the Norse worldview isn't, how do I survive this tragedy? Because the honest answer is, eventually you don't. Everyone falls. The only question that matters is, with what courage, dignity, and honor will I meet my fate?
That is the hard, clean wisdom. You are going to die. The people you love most are going to die. The systems you rely on will eventually fail, so make the time you have magnificent. Do not cower.
And understanding that deep psychological foundation explains why the clash with linear Christianity was so profoundly disorienting for the Norse.
Because it was totally alien to them.
Christian missionaries arrived, offering a transactional contract. Believe, repent, and you will live forever in a peaceful paradise. But the pagan Norsemen looked at them and thought, even the gods die. Why would I want to live forever in peace? I just want to die well.
Wow.
They were losing far more than just a roster of deities. They were losing their entire framework for what constituted courage, honor, and the shape of time itself.
It is a fundamental rewiring of the human operating system. And what a journey it has been to map it out. We started with Odin dragging a dead Cirrus from the grave to hear a chilling prophecy in the dark.
The beginning of the end.
We watched the moral fabric of society rot, the climate freeze into endless winter, and the horrifying majesty of the cosmic prison break a world wolf, a drowning serpent, and a ship made of human nails.
Unforgettable images.
We stood on the plain of Vigrid and witnessed the tragic, breathtaking final stand of the gods, where victory and death were exactly the same thing. And finally, we saw the quiet, hopeful vision of a green world rising from the ashes, where the survivors sat in the grass and picked up the pieces of the past.
It remains a masterpiece of mythological storytelling, precisely because it refuses to lie to its audience. It acknowledges the harsh, brutal reality of loss, while simultaneously celebrating the resilient, unbreakable spirit of the people who endure it.
And as massive as this cosmology is, it is only half the story. Our source material makes it clear that our next step is to bring this grand narrative down from the heavens and squarely into the mud.
Into the dirt of real life.
Next time, we're going to look at the daily, physical practice of these beliefs. We will explore the blood rituals, the animal sacrifices, the reading of the runes, and the architecture of the longhouses. We're going to see how these doomed, magnificent gods lived not just in epic poems, but in the everyday, breathing, survival-focused lives of the Norse people.
Because theology is abstract. What human beings actually do with that theology, how they build their laws, their ships, and their graves, is where the history truly lives.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. You and I don't lay awake at night worrying about giant wolves eating the sun. But we absolutely have our own modern anxieties about the end of things, runaway climate change, the fragility of global supply chains, the terrifying prospect of societal collapse.
Modern Ragnaroks.
If our world faced its own version of Ragnarok, if the complex systems we rely on burn down tomorrow, what are the golden game pieces you hope we would find in the new grass? What parts of our culture, our humanity, and our memories would you want the survivors to hold on to remember who we were? Because the Norse knew a fundamental truth. As long as we can pick up the pieces and as long as we remember the stories, life will always find a way to begin again. We'll catch you next time.